Over the last 150 days, the Shanghai Gold Exchange cumulative volume between it and the Shanghai Metals Exchange and the Futures Exchange has increased over 200%, and that volume is now greater than the COMEX. It's now the second most traded exchange on the planet. It's beginning to have severe significance. But he said in 2015, when China is allowed to speak at the table, the real price of gold will be observed. And the BRICS countries just built something called the BRICS Grain Exchange. And the guy that's running it, he said, we produce more of the wheat and the soft commodities than the West does, and we consume more of it, yet we don't have any ability to affect its price. That's all done on COMEX. But with the establishment of this new grain exchange, that will change. They know what we're doing with metals, and they're using it against us. That's exactly right. The reason they're not bitching yet is because they're using the brain-dead Western suppression to drain the exchanges. That's exactly what they're doing. And then when there's no more companies or entities willing to sell at these prices, I believe that the legitimate price setting will move eastward.
Good evening, investors, and welcome to the Economy Express channel. Tonight, we bring you urgent developments in the global financial system, shifts that could redefine the very foundation of the international monetary order. If you own assets, trade in commodities, or simply care about your financial future, you won't want to miss this. Renowned precious metals expert Andy Schectman, president and owner of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, has issued a stark warning.
To places like Shanghai, to places like Dubai and even Moscow, where these are the countries that appreciate, accumulate, stockpile, and understand metals better than the West does. We are now in Bretton Woods 3. Bretton Woods 1, when the dollar was backed by gold after World War II till 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window. Bretton Woods 2, when the dollar was tied to specifically and exclusively to oil purchases and oil sales through OPEC, which just ended about a month and a half ago when Saudi Arabia didn't cancel it, but said we're not going to be exclusive to the dollars. We're going to take other currencies too. Or Bretton Woods 3, this is all about commodities. But why? Think about it from a historical perspective. We're a country that is broke. We have a mountain of debt, 35 trillion. Trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. And when you think how big a trillion is, 31,688 years ago is a trillion seconds. We're at 35 trillion in debt. Our unfunded liabilities, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government military pensions are approaching 200 trillion. We'll never pay it back, ever. 77 trillion in Social Security, 99 trillion in Medicare Part B, 22 trillion in Medicare Part D. Just those three alone are 180 trillion in unfunded liabilities. You look at the U.S. government's balance sheet. Google, what is the asset base, or what are the largest assets of the U.S. government? It's $5 trillion. The largest asset of the U.S. government is student debt of $1.6 trillion. That's it. Now, the country has more money, but the U.S. government has $5 trillion in assets with up to $200 trillion in liabilities. We're broke. We're insolvent. We are viewed by most of the world as being wholly hypocritical. And we can say to Janet Yellen can say to CNN, we're okay with Xi and Putin being friends in BRICS. Thank you, Madam Secretary. That's great. But if Xi gives one penny to Putin or his war machine, we will sanction China's banks, their companies, and Beijing itself. Never mind the over 160 trillion or 260 billion rather, that we've given to the Ukraine, much in the way of weapons, the Stinger missiles, the F-16 jets, the intelligence on where to shoot it, training Ukrainian pilots in the Arizona desert, all of this stuff. That doesn't matter because we're the world reserve currency. And then what did they do? Then they confiscated, which is the same thing as stealing, which is the same thing as defaulting on $5 trillion in Russian treasuries here in the U.S. and used them to give, mostly in the form of weapons, think silver again, military-industrial complex, to the Ukraine, the country they're in a war against. So as the world reserve currency, it is not our prerogative to go around the world sanctioning everyone, where the West right now is sanctioning 60% of all the underdeveloped countries. We went to Iraq 21 years ago, under the guise of weapons of mass destruction. We're sorry we didn't find them. We destroyed your country, toppled your regime, and guess what? We're still here, sanctioning 14 of your banks for trying to buy liquid natural gas funneled through Iranian banks. And they made $90 billion in oil revenue last year. That's all held at the New York Fed. They can't even control their own natural resource revenue 20 years after supposedly installing a new regime and doing it the right way, looking for those weapons of mass destruction, saving the world. We didn't find any of it. And here we are. They asked us for $1 billion at the end of 23. We said, no, sorry. We're busy. It's your money. Come back. We'll give it to you next year. So what have they done? They've made trading in dollars illegal. If you do so and own a business, you'll end up in jail. They've gotten rid of all green bills as of January 1. There are none in Iraq, none in any bank. They have officially applied to BRICS, and they're kicking Western coalition forces out of the country. They look at us as being wholly hypocritical. So we can go around the world imposing sanctions using our treasuries as weapon. No, these are ours now because we don't like the way you play. It doesn't matter how we play. We're the world reserve currency. Our you-know-what doesn't stink, but we can tell you what to do. So the rest of the world says, well, let's see. Gold has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury, doubled it for 25 years with no counterparty risk. And so what they are slowly doing on top of selling dollars and repositioning, which is called de-dollarizing, this isn't a word, but you'll get my point. They are de-treasurizing also. They are slowly, instead of dumping treasuries, which causes too much attention, they used to roll them over. Every time they would expire, they would just roll it over and buy a new one, finance our exorbitant lifestyle, finance our debt binging society. Now they're not. Instead of them not rolling them over, they're buying commodities, like Zoltan Pozar says, he or she who has the commodities in Bretton Woods 3 wins. They're buying gold because it's doubled its performance. It has no counterparty liability. It can't be stolen. And if we look at the new BRICS ecosystem, the unit settlement token, which has been agreed upon in principle, according to the head of the BRICS New Development Bank, Dilma Rousseff, who was the former president of Brazil, you end up with a new system that needs gold. And if they enact a system where all of a sudden it is a common settlement currency backed by gold in a basket of BRICS plus currencies, the need to hold dollars, gone. The need to hold treasuries, gone. And like that, the whole thing snaps. Now, you could argue, I always, people give me a hard time because I say little by little by little, then all at once. This logarithmic decay, I always say, but this is what's happening. Little by little, the world is de-dollarizing and selling treasuries, not too fast to cut off their nose, to spite their face. Little by little, they're draining the exchanges of all of the world's commodities, not just gold and silver. China just bought the London Metals Exchange. That's the biggest exchange in the world for base metals. They're going all around the world in their Belt Road and striking deals in BRICS with all these underdeveloped countries that are resource rich, and they're doing it cooperatively instead of coercively. Even the name of their Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the largest regional military organization in the world, which Iran and Saudi Arabia just joined. All of these things are little by little by little chipping away at the dollar hegemony, which is gone. It's the supreme.
Global economic balance is shifting away from the West and toward the East. The world is undergoing a financial transformation, one that few are paying attention to, but the consequences will be monumental. Hashtag China's gold market surges past the COMEX. Over the last 150 days, the Shanghai Gold Exchange, along with the Shanghai Metals and Futures Exchanges, has witnessed a staggering 200% increase in cumulative trading volume. In a historic shift, these exchanges have now surpassed the COMEX in significance, making China the second most influential market for gold pricing in the world.
Supremacy that's not gone yet, but that's next. Right. And when these countries, if indeed all of the oil-producing countries agree to the new BRICS settlement currency called the unit, it will change the landscape of this country forever. And when you bring it all the way back home, the craziest part about it all is that our lead economic advisor to the United States government right now, many of you probably saw his stupidity trying to explain bond sales and money creation and on Twitter a few months ago. The guy couldn't even speak. This is a guy who has a degree in music and a master's degree in social work. A master's degree in social work. He is an inclusionary economist, a modern monetary theorist knucklehead who says we shouldn't have the world reserve currency. He has written a report called Dethrone King Dollar where he advocates for this. So if you think about it, what better way to lose the reserve currency than to weaponize the dollar, to tell Saudi Arabia, hey, we're going green. Thanks anyway. It's been great run. We're going green. We're not going to really need fossil fuels anymore. And then let the country go to all of the things that made this country great. All of a sudden, people are like, is this bizarro world we're living in? Or is it too stupid to be stupid? Could all of this be planned so that the world dumps dollars and that we reset the system. And instead of blaming the Fed and the fiscal irresponsibility of the Treasury Department for destroying the American dream, we can blame Xi Jinping, Putin, and OPEC for dumping the dollar. After all, we incentivize the hell out of them to do it. But the public, well, they don't know that. The media doesn't report any of this. You got to dig, and read every day like I do, even to come close to finding this stuff out. And if you don't, you'll just think that we are victims to this awful thing that destroyed the reserve currency. The whole thing resets as every country in the world who's had to stockpile dollars and treasuries has no need to do that anymore, dumps them. And this is why I've been saying for the last 2 years that you will see the Western system, the COMEX and the LBMA, exposed for what it is. It is a scam, if you will, where the futures market is controlling the price of the underlying commodity, and it's not right. So let me just read this to you because it's very telling. He says, the second part of this new currency is price. For the moment, price is determined by Western speculation. Very true. We produce these commodities, we consume them, but we do not have our own price mechanism, which will balance supply and demand. Now, during the COVID pandemic, the price for oil fell to nearly zero. Now, he's wrong there. It fell to negative $40 a barrel. Kind of, I guess that encapsulates my point, where an exchange can push oil down to negative 40 a barrel. That's not right. Anyways, he says, it's impossible to make any strategic planning for economic development if you do not control prices of basic commodities. Price formation with this new currency should get rid of the Western exchanges of commodities. Because James Rickards came out and publicly said that they're going to issue a common settlement currency at the August meeting in Johannesburg last year, I think a lot of people, when they came out of that meeting and said, no, we're going to task our finance ministers with going back to the drawing board and presenting their new findings at the meeting here in Russia in October, people said it's a nothing burger. I look at it differently. Like in crypto speak, mass adoption. Well, 35 more countries have formally applied to the BRICS, and another 20 plus have informally applied. Take a look at what Saudi Arabia has done in the span of just a couple of years. They've joined the BRICS. They have applied to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the largest regional financial and military organization on the planet. And they too will join BRICS, as James Rickards said, and as I've been saying for 3 years, because they're the same countries that are all invested in the Belt Road Initiative, in the BRICS, in the new BRICS Development Bank that Saudi Arabia also applied to. Saudi Arabia signed military agreements with Russia for protection, and it's the protection of the Saudi kingdom that gives us the dollar hegemony. So when you have a country that signs an executive order to go green, that Biden did, that weaponizes the dollar, where our brain-dead Treasury Secretary goes to Brazil just a few weeks ago in Russia's backyard, part of the...
Welcome to Economy Express, your go-to destination for all things economics and finance. Whether you're an experienced investor, an inquisitive student, or just someone who wants to stay ahead in today's ever-changing...
For years, Western institutions have controlled commodity pricing through speculative markets, but Schectman suggests that the tides are turning. China, along with BRICS nations, is quietly establishing new systems that will shift price control away from the West. This isn't just about gold. It's about commodities, currency reserves, and ultimately, financial power. #, the BRICS Grain Exchange and Commodity Price Control. In a strategic move, the BRICS nations have launched the BRICS Grain Exchange, an institution designed to challenge Western-dominated commodity pricing. The leader of this initiative recently stated, "We produce more of the world's wheat and soft commodities than the West, yet we have no say in its price." That changes now. For decades, global food prices have been determined by Western markets like the COMEX and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. But now, countries that actually produce and consume the most food are demanding control over pricing. #, weaponizing the US dollar. A dangerous game? One of Schectman's biggest concerns is the ongoing weaponization of the US dollar. The United States has used economic sanctions as a geopolitical tool for years, freezing assets and restricting financial access for countries that don't align with its policies. The latest example? The U.S. confiscated $5 trillion in Russian treasuries and redirected those funds, largely for military aid to Ukraine. While these moves may serve short-term political interests, they are rapidly eroding trust in the dollar as the world's reserve currency. More than 60% of underdeveloped nations are currently under U.S. sanctions. Countries like China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia are responding by seeking alternative financial systems that bypass the dollar entirely. Hashtag Bretton Woods 3. The birth of a new monetary system? Schectman argues that we are witnessing the emergence of Bretton Woods 3, a new economic order where commodities, not the U.S. dollar, will be the foundation of global trade. Historically, the world has experienced two major financial agreements. Bretton Woods I, 1944 to 1971. The U.S. dollar was backed by gold. Bretton Woods II, 1971 to 2023. The U.S. dollar was tied to oil transactions via OPEC. But with Saudi Arabia's recent decision to accept multiple currencies for oil sales, the dollar's exclusive control over global energy trade is dissolving. This marks the transition into Bretton Woods III, an era where the most valuable global assets will be commodities like gold, silver, oil, and grain. Hashtag a nation in debt. The U.S. financial crisis. While global power shifts eastward, the United States faces a financial crisis of epic proportions. The U.S. national debt now exceeds $35 trillion. To put this into perspective, 1 trillion seconds is over 31,688 years. Unfunded liabilities, including Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, are approaching $200 trillion. The total U.S. government asset base? Only $5 trillion. This imbalance has led many experts, including Schectman, to declare the U.S. insolvent. The country's mounting obligations are unsustainable, and unless drastic measures are taken, a financial reckoning is inevitable. Hashtag the rush for gold. What smart money is doing. As trust in the dollar erodes, central banks around the world are turning to gold. For 16 consecutive months, China has been aggressively increasing its gold reserves. Why? Because gold has outperformed U.S. treasuries for the past 25 years. Without counterparty risk, unlike fiat currency, gold is a tangible asset that cannot be devalued through government policies or inflation. Schectman warns that we are approaching a tipping point. If BRICS nations officially introduce a gold-backed settlement currency, the need for the U.S. dollar will vanish overnight. Countries holding trillions in U.S. debt will have no reason to keep their dollar reserves. The global financial system will reset. Hashtag final thought. What investors must do now. The pieces are falling into place for a major monetary realignment. China and BRICS nations are accumulating hard assets, while the West remains entangled in debt and economic mismanagement. For investors, the message is clear. Pay attention to commodities. Gold, silver, and essential resources will be the foundation of the new global economy. Diversify away from dollar-based assets. The more nations de-dollarize, the more the dollar's purchasing power will decline. Stay informed. The mainstream media isn't covering these shifts, but those who are aware will be ahead of the curve. Andy Schectman's warning is loud and clear. Most people have no idea what's about to happen, but now you do. That's it for tonight's special report on the Economy Express channel. Stay ahead of the markets, stay informed, and as always, protect your wealth. I'm your name, signing off. Good night and see you next time.